Compiler directives are often used to make an application work differently depending upon the build profile. You learned about build profiles in Lesson 1.3. In this lesson, you will use the if directive to compile certain code only if the project is compiled using a build profile that defines the debug constant. By default, the debug profile defines the debug constant. You will learn more about constants in Lesson 6.4. To begin this lesson, open the Market Trader project from your Sample Files folder. And open site.master in Design View. This is a master page. Master pages are covered in Session 12 of the Essential Skills course in this series. Every page that is associated with a master page inherits both the layout and any C# code that is included in the master page. Every page in this project is associated with this master page. Notice that there is a label control in the top right corner named Label Debug. You are going to add a compiler directive that will show a message in this label only if the project is built using the debug profile. Open the code behind file of site.master now and add the following code to the page load event handler. Label debug.text equals debug mode not for release. This code will run regardless of which build profile is used to build the project. You will need to add a compiler directive in order to change this. Add a new line to the start of the page load event handler and type #if debug. Now add a new line at the end of the page load event handler and type #endif. You will notice that the compiler directives appear to the far left of the rest of the code. This is to indicate that they will only affect the compiler and are not part of the programming logic itself. When the compiler processes this code, it will see the if directive and will compile the label_debug.text line of code only if the debug constant is present. This means that the code will be entirely omitted from the built version of the site if the debug constant is not enabled. You may remember seeing the option for the debug constant in Lesson 1.5. Now make sure that the debug profile is selected from the drop-down menu on the top toolbar and click Debug, Start Debugging. Your message appears in the top right corner as expected. When you start debugging, the project is automatically built using your selected build profile. Because the debug profile has the debug constant enabled, your compiler directive allowed the code to be compiled. Close your web browser now and select Release from the Build Profiles drop-down menu. Now click Debug, Start Debugging, and this time there is no message in the top right corner. Your compiler directive did not find the debug constant because it isn't enabled in the release profile. This is a good way to ensure that you don't accidentally release an unoptimized debug version of your code. Close your web browser now, and close Visual Studio. Note that as well as being useful for selectively compiling code using the if directive, the debug constant is also relevant to the system.diagnostics namespace. Some of the methods in the system.diagnostics namespace are able to detect the debug constant and react accordingly. You will see how this works in Lesson 6.8. You've now completed Lesson 6.2. Use the if directive to selectively compile code.